Good evening from the State of Kuwait. Welcome to the 7 o'clock news for Thursday, the 9th of April 2015. I am Dalia Badran with the headlines for tonight. The Arab coalition's Operation Decisive Storm enters its third week as it continues to target Houthi rebels. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry warns Iran over its support for Houthi rebels in Yemen and reaffirms support for the Arab coalition. Iraqi troops supported by civil volunteers are preparing to launch an attack on the so-called Daesh group in Anbar province. Gunmen stormed the office of the Attorney General in northern Afghanistan, killing at least 5 people and injuring 25. Hello and welcome. His Highness Emir Sheikh Sabah Al Ahmad Al Jaber Al Sabah sent a cable of condolences to His Majesty King Hamad bin Isa bin Salman Al Khalifa of the Kingdom of Bahrain on the passing away of Sheikha Aisha bint Ibrahim bin Muhammad bin Isa Al Khalifa. His Highness the Deputy Emir and Crown Prince Sheikh Nawaf Al Ahmad Al Jaber Al Sabah sent a cable of condolences to His Majesty King Hamad bin Isa bin Salman Al Khalifa of the Kingdom of Bahrain on the passing away of Sheikha Aisha bint Ibrahim bin Muhammad bin Isa Al Khalifa. His Highness Sheikh Jaber Al Mubarak Al Hamad Al Sabah, the Prime Minister, also sent a similar cable. The Ministry of Interior announced that it is successfully rerun its mainframe computer and electronic systems, including databases affiliated with the ministry's security authorities, after completing the safety drills to ensure that all systems are working properly. The ministry added in a statement today that specialized technical teams affiliated with the ministry's Information and Communication Technology Department conducted field and applied tests to guarantee the soundness of all systems and databases. Moreover, the ministry expressed gratitude to both citizens and expatriates for their understanding and patience over the system's precautionary and preventive hold, affirming that the ministry's bodies do not spare any effort in serving the visitors. Operation Decisive Storm, led by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, entered its third week today. Military spokesperson for the Arab coalition, Brigadier General Ahmad Asiri, said a large number of the Houthi militias and people loyal to them have surrendered to popular committees in Aden. Asiri has again called on some military leaders to return to support legitimacy in Yemen, praising those who have already made contact with the legitimate government to discuss their return to the Yemeni army. Meanwhile, Asiri said an aid ship arrived at Aden port as popular committees are coordinating the delivery of aid for those affected by the Houthi attacks. The Pentagon said the United States has started daily aerial refueling for warplanes in the Saudi-led coalition carrying out airstrikes against the Houthi rebels in Yemen. Pentagon spokesman Colonel Stephen Warren said air refueling planes will be carrying out refueling missions every day outside Yemen airspace. Pentagon had announced plans for area refueling earlier, and officials said American forces stand ready to fly early warning radar aircraft if necessary. The United Arab Emirates Foreign Minister Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed Al Nahyan said the Arab coalition conducting airstrikes in Yemen could not rule out any options, including ground troops. Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed made the comments during a visit by Yemeni Foreign Minister Riyad Yassin to the United Arab Emirates capital of Abu Dhabi. The Yemeni Foreign Ministry said Operation Decisive Storm's main objective is reaching a political solution for the country and its people. He affirmed that Iran trained a number of Houthi rebels and that forces from Iran's Revolutionary Guard are already inside Yemen. Meanwhile, Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed said Houthis are conducting a foreign agenda on Yemeni soil and are not loyal to Yemen. He also agreed that eventually a comprehensively political solution is the way to end the crisis.
Outcome, I don't think it's appropriate for any of us to exclude any party in any country. So if we're talking about a political outcome in Yemen, I don't think it's appropriate for any of us to say that we want to exclude or include a certain element or a group or a tribe in Yemen. So obviously everyone is welcomed. For any political outcome, I don't think it's...
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry today warned Iran over its support for Houthi rebels in Yemen. He said the U.S. would support any state in the Middle East that felt threatened by Iran and would not stand by if Iran destabilized the region. The U.S. is backing the Arab coalition, seeking to drive back the rebels and restore legitimate President Abdurrabbu Mansour Hadi.
There are obviously supplies that have been coming from Iran. There are a number of flights every single week that have been flying in, and we trace those flights and we know this. We're well aware of the support that Iran has been giving to Yemen. And Iran needs to recognize that the United States is not going to stand by while the region is destabilized or while people engage in overt warfare across lines, international boundaries in other countries.
That was John Kerry warning Iran over its support for Houthi rebels in Yemen. Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi said the Iraqi troops are preparing to launch an attack on the so-called Daesh group in Anbar province west of Baghdad. The Iraqi troops will be joined by volunteers who will be helping the forces free Anbar after they removed the group from Tikrit. Walid al-Ta'i has more from Baghdad.
Reconciling efforts are obviously imprinted from the side of the central government. Baghdad, Prime Minister Lange, have thoughtfully not minding having the Kurd part of the official army forces to liberate Mosul, since it has been under the siege of the so-called Daesh months ago. Now time is ticking for down-count schedule for liberation with no falling back.
The most important step the government is heading to is to remove the illusions and fears that were expressed by Kurd officials, which achieved by the Prime Minister, and the perfect statements released by Masoud al-Barzani, whom have said in it that all of the regional forces are to serve the liberation of Mosul.
Mission task is to mobilize to Mosul after finalizing the work plans and the military strategy worthiness simulation, pushing forward with many divisions along with the international support, coordinating together for the airstrikes, as these were the aspects discussed with the mutual operation room between Arab and Kurd since the last visit of the al-Abadi to Erbil.
The threat that Kurdistan is subject to is a threat to all of the country. Also, the threat upon Iraq is a threat upon all of the region of Kurdistan and all of the Iraqi lands as well. And we have treaties and agreements for the next level.
Iraqi military forces divisions have been fully armored in the lately time, each individual soldiers fully equipped with combat gear. But different battlegrounds requires different gears and military equipments. Currently, the Iraqi army officials are studying the successful demanded battle gears for the situation of Mosul, concentrating on previous failures to avoid in this battle.
I don't expect to having the public mass army participating in the battle of liberating Mosul and even Al-Anbar. And there are many objections from Masoud al-Barzani, Kurdistan regional president, and also the reject of other political leaderships, and even Ninawa Governor Athil al-Nujafi.
Speculations announced by experts have assured that Mosul battle will have the most ruthless impact upon all aspects, civilians and military clashes when fighting the so-called Daesh, regardless of the aerial raids that the Iraqi army along with the Peshmerga troops will be provided with. So it is still ground troops formations that will conduct forward bounding against the insurgents' safe places. Erbil talks will conquer better strategy with better plans, presumably since the last time the Iraqi army have lost many soldiers' lives due to mistakes within the strategy. Walid Altai, Kuwait TV, Baghdad.
Hundreds of protesters marched in Gaza City today in support of an embattled Palestinian refugee camp in Damascus. At least 18 civilians have been killed in Yarmouk refugee camp in the past week since Daesh attacked the camp. A Hamas official described the situation in the camp as a humanitarian disaster, saying there was a need for the intervention of all factions in the camp and the international community to save the people from an inevitable disaster. The dire situation in the camp appears certain to deteriorate as the extremist group looks to consolidate its hold and establish a presence near the heart of the Syrian capital. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani said Tehran will only sign a final nuclear accord with 6 world powers if all sanctions imposed over its disputed atomic work are lifted on the same day. Iran and the powers reached a tentative agreement last week in the Swiss city of Lausanne aimed at restricting Tehran's nuclear program in return for removing the economic penalties. All sides are working towards a June 30th deadline for a final deal on the nuclear work, which Western powers fear is aimed at developing an atomic bomb, but Tehran says is purely peaceful. Rouhani affirmed that his country will not sign any deal unless all sanctions are lifted on the same day. Since the preliminary agreement was reached, Iran and the United States are still arguing over some issues, including the pace and extent of the sanctions removal. Gunmen dressed in military uniforms have stormed the office of the Attorney General in the northern Afghan city of Mazar al-Sharif, killing at least 5 people and injuring 25. Afghanistan's Interior Ministry said 3 gunmen had been killed, leaving 1 or 2 still inside the building. Many of the roads around the scene are now closed and helicopters are hovering overhead as the area has been surrounded by the Afghan National Security Forces. The attack in Mazar al-Sharif comes a day after an American soldier was killed in a firefight between U.S. and Afghan troops in eastern Afghanistan. Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras held talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow today as part of an eye-catching visit that has fueled EU fears. The meeting is part of Tsipras' 2-day trip to Russia that has concerned many officials in the EU, which has levied strong economic sanctions against Moscow over its annexation of Crimea and support for separatist forces in eastern Ukraine. Both sides have talked up the possibility of closer economic ties between the two nations ahead of the visit set to be followed by another trip to Moscow for Three Pass for World War II victory anniversary commemoration in May. Meanwhile, the Eurozone has said only 6 working days are left for Greece to come up with a revised list of reforms to seal a deal on its next rescue bailout. And finally tonight, at the end of this week's trading at Kuwait Stock Exchange, the main indices closed with mixed boards. KSX 15 lost 8.52 points, recording 1,020.11 points, and the weighted index lost 1.83 points, reaching 425.62 points. However, the price index gained 22.44 points, reaching 6,277.82 points. For a chance to see our reports again, please visit our YouTube channel at MOI Kuwait News. And before we end, here is a quick reminder of today's headlines. The Arab coalition's Operation Decisive Storm enters its third week as it continues to target Houthi rebels. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry warns Iran over its support for Houthi rebels in Yemen and reaffirms support for the Arab coalition. Iraqi troops supported by civil volunteers are preparing to launch an attack on the so-called Daesh group in Anbar province. Gunmen stormed the office of the Attorney General in northern Afghanistan, killing at least 5 people and injuring 25.